Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, July 24th Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I hear any changes or corrections?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, agenda is approved. Next up are minutes from the July 10th, 2017 meeting. Any edits or omissions?
I do have one slight addition. Julie, on the bottom of page 3, it says Kirk stated this project's intriguing because the area has historically had, could you add parking and traffic issues? Just add the parking in there, please.
Commissioner Farr?
Mr. Chairman, I also have one addition. There was some discussion back and forth on the designation of the zoning district that we were zoning to. It was a TOD district, and there are 3 flavors of that, TOD-R, MU, and then, I'm sorry, I forget the third one, actually, employment, E. I believe Commissioner Weber brought it up first, and I brought it up next, that we thought the TOD mixed use would be the more appropriate district instead of TOD-R. Staff commented and gave us adequate answers to support their selection of TOD-R in lieu of TOD-MU. I thought that should be part of the record.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, staff can work with the recording secretary to add that.
Thank you.
Other edit?
Yes. Julie, I have a question about the, my question to you regarding linkage between the park and retail centers to the south and east and the proposed development. Commissioner Kirk talked about traffic flow problems. I think we discussed that with the city engineer. However, in reviewing the minutes, I did not see sufficient address of my point, and my concern remains when you bring in 222 units, you have eating establishments, and then you have a lovely park called Purgatory across the way. I'm concerned about safe transit between the park, additional retail, and that apartment system with respect to elderly, handicap, and children. And I wasn't satisfied that the city is addressing it squarely.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, staff will also work with the recording secretary to add that conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, any other, entertain a motion to approve?
You know, I would move to table approval of the minutes until we see the additions.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Okay, is it open to discussion still?
Sure.
Okay, is the timing of that problematic with the issue traveling to City Council? Should we see it before we meet next?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in the event that an item is scheduled for council review before there are approved minutes, unapproved minutes do get forwarded to the council, so they at least have some type of record to review as a part of the packet.
Will that be the case in this instance?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we would make the changes that you have discussed this evening and forward those on to the council as unapproved minutes as part of their packet for their August 8th meeting.
Thank you.
Does that work?
I think we have a second, so.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Minutes are postponed. All right, next up, we have a public hearing this evening. It's a code amendment related to Parks Zoning District, a request to amend City Code Chapter 11 relating to Parks Zoning District. Will the city staff speak to this, please?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, before you this evening is a code amendment that proposes the creation of a parks zoning district. So the 2009 comprehensive plan identifies parcels for land use such as a park/open space designation. However, the city zoning ordinance does not include a parks zoning district. So as such, we end up with all of these parcels that are guided for park and open space being zoned a variety of things, anything ranging from rural to single-family residential districts to commercial to industrial in some cases, or office. So in order to rectify that situation and to follow through on an implementation strategy from the 2009 comprehensive plan, staff's been working for the last several months to create a parks zoning district. That district is intended to identify permitted uses that would be allowed within that zoning district, as well as identify performance standards such as setbacks, parking requirements, landscaping requirements, and the like for that zoning district. Similar to the exercise that the Planning Commission and City Council recently went through with the establishment of the TOD zoning district, this action before you is related only to creating the regulations. They would not, if approved, they would not apply to any specific properties unless and until that property was rezoned. And there would be a separate public process for the rezoning of any specific properties to a parks district. The intention of this zoning district is that it would be applied to city-owned parks, and in an effort to address the performance standards and uses that are currently going on within those specific properties. In addition, staff has worked with park staff, specifically Matt Bourne reviewed this park zoning district with the Parks and Natural Resources Commission at their meeting several weeks ago, and the Parks and Natural Resources Commission is supportive of the creation of this zoning district. Staff's also worked with the city attorney to review the language to make sure that we haven't created any problematic situations, and he has expressed his comfort with the zoning district. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Staff is recommending approval.
Initial questions from the commission.
Mr. Chairman, could you state the nonconformities that you mentioned in your staff report that would exist if certain public parks get rezoned to this district?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as part of the draft regulations that were prepared, staff worked diligently to minimize the amount of nonconformities that would be created with the zoning district, because as you can imagine, parks created over quite a broad range in time incorporate a variety of different design standards. So as a part of creation of the district, we did a very thorough inventory of all the park properties to understand what are the parking setbacks, what are the building heights, what are the parking count requirements, or parking count on-site, landscaping, all of those things. So there are a few situations where staff has tweaked the language in order to have that language apply to any development moving forward, so as to allow the existing condition to remain conforming, and any new expansion or creation of park properties would be required to comply with the new standards, such as the parking lot standards are applicable to parking lots that are new or enlarged after the adoption of the ordinance. That was done in order to minimize the nonconformities. And I believe that that was also the case for the landscaping. So the landscaping standards are to be applied after the adoption of this ordinance, because as you know, our park staff works very diligently with the Parks and Natural Resources Commission as well as adjacent property owners to take those park plans through a public process and have those reviewed. So rather than propose the creation of nonconformities for existing parks that have been through that public review process, staff is proposing to apply these new standards moving forward.
Thank you.
Julie, can I ask you a question, please? I think it's a great idea to condense things down. Question I have, and I probably know the answer, these are how we got into having so many of different zonings. Accumulation over a long period of time. I imagine some of these have been in place for many, many years. Am I right?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, you're correct. I mean, the parks parks system has been created over decades. So as properties have been acquired, neighborhoods have expanded, there's been a need to create public parks. And in some cases, there wasn't necessarily a need to go back and rezone the property. As we've talked about with regard to several other code amendments that have come before you, there used to be a kind of a catch-all phrase called public facilities that was allowed in the zoning ordinance. So parks could be interpreted under that. Now that that is not the case, and this is part of an implementation strategy of the 2009 comp plan, it's now time to bring forward a draft for specifically to address park districts.
Thank you.
Any initial questions?
I just got an observation, maybe just breezing through this quickly. I noticed that the park district is exempt from requirements. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 4 places that I saw in 2 pages that I've read here. We're exempting them from these requirements, and then we're setting forth in another area. Am I understanding that correctly, or am I? Just for example, parking lot setbacks are exempted from these requirements. Parking lot setback standards for this district are set forth in 11.xx. And then we also have side yard and rear yard setbacks, but then there's a table that states side yard and minimum yard setback earlier in the packet. So am I following this correctly?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the draft ordinance that's in your packet this evening is kind of split up into 2 sections. The first part of it is the text language that's specific to the park district. So pages 1 through 4 would be drafted and included within a specific section of the zoning ordinance. Then when you get to pages 5 through 9, those are changes that are made intermittently throughout the zoning ordinance. So for instance, throughout the zoning ordinance, there might be reference to certain performance standards that will list out this standard applies to the following zoning districts. So in order to make sure that the zoning district is, or the zoning ordinance is consistent, if we need to refer to the park district later on in the document, we're doing that. So that's the intent of pages 5 through 9, where there are those tables that are inserted throughout the zoning ordinance. If it refers to what are the setbacks for these zoning districts, we're including the park district in the table because it's a new district that's being created, so that people can go directly to the table and see what all of the requirements are, rather than having to backtrack to the language that's specific to the parks district.
So then the suffix 11.xx, that's to be named later, depending upon where it lies. Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that'll be filled in with 2 other digits depending on where we decide to place it within the zoning ordinance. We'll have to find a section that is available so that we don't renumber it the same as an existing zoning district.
Commissioner Prairie?
Could I also ask another question, follow up to that? As it's scattered throughout the language in the ordinance, the lighting issue specifically talks about relief from the glare and illumination standards and directs you to the 11 point ... Is that anything more or less than what was in the body above in the first few pages where it talks about a directed light?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it is referring back to the same standards. So once that section of the ordinance is identified as to where the Parks District will land, that number will be filled in. But it is the same requirement throughout.
Okay, we're going to have the performance standard that there should be no lighting leaving the property line.
Correct.
Especially to residential areas.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now? This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak for or against this amendment, would you please step forward? All right. Any further discussion on this item? Everyone willing to move to close the public hearing?
Sure. Move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. Move to recommend approval of the amendment to the City Code, Chapter 11, related to Park Zoning District based on the information included in the staff report dated July 19th, 2017, and its attachments.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on, do we have a planner's report this evening?
Not this evening.
Any members' report? Continuing business, new business? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, meeting's adjourned. I assume ayes.
Aren't you glad I found that for you?